Hi, friends. I'm Amelia.
And I'm Danielle.
And welcome to Sibyl's Gab, which is the series where two divination enthusiasts prattle on about whatever we want. And this week we are talking about fortune telling. So, what is it? Why is it controversial? And how it fits into our cartomancy practices.
All right, guys, here's the plan. We have a list of questions that will shape our conversation. And you know the standard advice. These opinions are entirely our own. So know that we're talking from personal experience. These are not objective truths that we're claiming. And with terms and traditions as old as fortune telling, we know that any discussion is necessarily personal and really culturally nuanced. So we will be keeping that in mind. But let's get to our first question. Speaking for Sibyl in her lab of cartomantics, what is fortune telling and what is it not?
So I thought about this.
Good news.
I think for us, part of our love of fortune telling comes from the decks that are available, of course. Like we love a good Lenormand, we love a Sibilla, we love, all of those things. But I think ultimately, even outside of those systems, those cartomantic systems, to me at least, and you can feel free to disagree, Danielle, but to me, fortune telling is a type of card reading that's really heavily invested in outcome. So a lot of times we think of fortune telling as divining the future or telling the future. In fact, that's the Merriam-Webster definition of fortune telling. And so I think that kind of a modern take on it as we partake is that it is reading some kind of divination that is invested in the outcome of a situation, as opposed to, what's going on right now and what can I do right now in these circumstances. But what do you think?
I agree with that. I think about fortune telling as an alternative to what I imagine and learned as a kind of normalized traditional tarot and card practice, as we often talk about it on YouTube, which is like a kind of depth consideration, some spiritual work, whatever. Fortune telling is very much not that, right? It is a fussy grandma. It is you go sit at the kitchen table and she whips out the playing cards and you ask her a question and she has a short answer for you on the basis of the 3-card spread she did. I envision this as a really direct, simple and unhesitant answer. So it is tricky and it's nuanced. I mean, something that you and I have talked about is that we're talking a global tradition, often a feminized tradition across cultures. So this isn't any stereotypical singular tradition that we find in sort of obnoxiously represented in movies. It's kind of dynamic and it is imagined as a lot of different things. But what tends to come in common is the idea that it is a direct projection of your fortune, of what's going to happen for you, good, bad, and ugly. And I aim for that. I sort of admire that impatient, I've talked before about how I'm an aspirational crone, like the fussy crone.
Yeah. And I think, yes. And I think it is a tradition of divination that is uninterested in sort of this I don't want to say it's uninterested in spiritual high-mindedness, but in a way, it's uninterested in our feelings about the matter. It just wants to state the facts. Of course, feelings come into play, but and that's often the motivation behind why you would want to get a reading that is more fortune telling. And oftentimes I find, well, I won't get into that.
Well, we're going to talk about the kinds of questions there are. So we'll talk about that. But it's a nuanced thing. I mean, we talked for a moment before we started filming, and we're like, have you figured out what you're going to say fortune telling? Because I haven't, like it is a contested category. Us nerdy academics who are trying to defend ourselves, inoculate ourselves from criticism, say it is a contested term, but it is a contested term. All right, what's our next? Oh, go ahead.
So why are people so suspicious of and resistant to even just the term fortune telling, and also just generally this type of divination? And, kind of to follow that up is like, how have we seen this suspicion shape conversation just in the larger tarot community?
So there are, this is multivalent. I think there is a quite reasonable, what we see in fortune telling laws, an anxiety about people being predatory towards other gullible people, right? So like I can read your cards and tell you the winning lottery numbers. You give me $100 and I'll give you the answer to 100,000, right? Like this is really, that is predatory and it's vile and problematic. We would argue, I think I can say confidently, we would both argue that that is not all that fortune telling is, and it's certainly not fortune telling at its best. Most fortune telling across history and traditions, I have a few blog posts on this, hardly comprehensive for the world history of fortune telling, but most traditions of fortune telling in Irish culture, in Caribbean culture, whatever, are how are the crops going to do this year? Or, like these sort of simple, high stakes, altar of the kitchen sink things you've talked about on Instagram, right? Like, but I think there is an anxiety about predatory fortune tellers. And that has led into a discourse that I think feels in some ways a little culturally insensitive and racist. So not just like fortune tellers are bad, but we imagine these are the kinds of people that fortune tellers are, and they're thieves, and right, like this kind of, and it's the subtext is that Romani people are fortune tellers who are looking to be predatory. That's how it kind of evolves in a gross way. But I think that conversation, part of it that says let's protect people who are gullible, is a good thing. So that makes it tricky and uncomfortable, and is part of the reason that we're like, let's be really careful in the way that we engage this. What would you say?
I mean, to kind of piggyback off of that, like not only, trapping, kind of ensnaring people that are gullible, but I think it also, I think when people talk about like divining, especially like when we're talking about looking at the future or outcomes, it tends to give off this sense that there is a fixed future and that we can't affect, and that our agency within a situation is removed. And I would argue that like looking into and forecasting the future gives us more agency to shape that in a way that we want it to. We can talk about the nuts and the bolts and the hows and the why, like the how of fortune telling, but I think people have this kind of allergic reaction to it, aside from the sort of like charlatan nature that people kind of have associated with fortune telling. But even, as tarot readers in the tarot community, there's this kind of automatic, I don't tell the future sort of, no, that's not what I do sort of thing. As if telling the future or even investigating the future implies that it is fixed and that we have no agency over our own fates. And so I think, there are several layers to why people feel the way they do. And I was that person. I have been that person who's like, oh, no, I don't tell the future. I don't, and I think, it's such a nuanced thing. And I think we as tarot readers have even gotten to this point where we kind of, no, I'm not a fortune teller, sort of language as a reaction to people accusing us of being untrustworthy.
Absolutely, it's defensive. It's I know what you mean, like the word fortune teller as an indictment, and I think we've internalized that. And I see that subtext in the tarot community. I mean, the community that I love that's talking online and talking on YouTube, these anxieties crop up in that way, which is like, let me make it absolutely clear. There's what they do over there, like the fakes, and there's what we're doing here. I do not like, though, and we've talked extensively about what you and I want this to be, the work we're doing, and like the tarot we read and cartomancy as we imagine it. This is a false dichotomy in my imagined like world, point of view. Like when I say I do fortune telling, it's not a clean line between the fortune telling I do there and the other kind of reading I do here. It's an embrace of like a more umbrella term that is not anxious with that word, right? Like I have to say I've grown increasingly uncomfortable with something that I myself used to do, which is that insistence on I do this kind of reading. I'm not a fortune teller, because it's not, I do ancestral work, I don't do goddess work, right? Which is a statement of fact. I do this, but not that. I do both, but like, speaking as a person, a random reader, I do, whatever it is kind of reading, but not that kind of reading. It's an implied judgment. I do good tarot, I do depth, like psychology, self-reflective tarot, and then that over there, and I don't like that judgmental subtext. But I myself used to ascribe to it, and I got called out for it once, I think, in an absolutely reasonable way. I found some really, fancy quote that I posted in a Facebook group about like, here's what tarot can be. It's not fortune telling. And this woman in the comments was like, girl, who do you think you are? And I had to sit with that and really think about the fact that what I had said, what I'd quoted, had the subtext, not just here's this great thing tarot can do, but here's the thing it shouldn't do. And that like my tarot doesn't do.
Well, and as kind of, because my Libra moon has to come out, I think it is also okay for people to say, this is where my skill set lies within divination, because I would argue that fortune telling divination is its own skill. It is its own version of reading. And it's okay to say, this is not work that I am that I'm
good at.
That I like, or I'm good at, I feel comfortable in, like that is totally fine. I think what you and I try to do, especially under like the kind of umbrella of Sibyl's lab, is to say that it doesn't have to be either or. It's a yes and. Like there is no such thing as this, we kind of reject the binary of this is tarot reading and this is fortune telling. We say it all can contribute to a really well-rounded approach to answering a question. There to me, when I answer a question, I know we're going to talk about questions in a little bit, but like fortune telling is just one layer of approaching a question that is added on to the many other layers and approaches that I take to one single question, so that for ourselves, whether we're reading for ourselves or whether we're reading for clients, we can just get this really clear whole picture of what it is that we want to know about. I think it is a really valuable reading skill and tool that can open so many doors to just possibilities of what cards can do and what they can bring us.
And I said this, it is our dance around what we call ourselves. I'll say I'm allergic to the word psychic. The suggestion that what we do is like psychic, I'm like, no. I don't like that term. I don't want that term. I probably am struggling with that term in some of the ways that I think some people struggle with the word fortune telling, which is defensively. I mean, lots of people look at what we do and say fortune telling, or tarot rather, is grifting. right? Like you're doing something that's scammy if you're doing tarot, even if we're sort of clear that we're doing something that's not giving you your lottery numbers and trying to take advantage of anyone. And so like it makes sense that we try to be intentional with our words. I think maybe part of what you and I are trying to do is to rescue and reclaim the word fortune telling as an affirmative practice. Like we're not inventing something new. I feel like we're trying to say like, hey, remember, it's this amazing thing. Like, and we were kind of sort of doing it anyway. Like, and part of what we're trying to do, I think, is honor that tradition of all of these people who have created this robust cartomancy practice that we're jumping into. Let's not fib and suggest that like the people who very much called themselves fortune tellers didn't like advance and create and grow what we are now part of, right? Like let's show some respect. We are talking though, let's talk about questions. What is the difference between a fortune telling question and a non-fortune telling question, and what kind of answers are produced that are different answers than like, here's fortune telling, here's regular or non-fortune telling?
I would argue that any question is a fortune telling question, but I think, you know, in a very, that's the like kind of Zen side of me. That's like, the answer is yes and no. I reject the question altogether. No, I think, you know, an example of, I would say that most people, whether they want to admit it or not, what they want is fortune telling. Is my daughter going to graduate high school on time? Is my boyfriend going to realize that he's, you know, messing up this relationship? Is, you know, what you know, what is the, if I took this job, what will the outcome be? Like these are fortune telling questions in my mind. And these are questions that, again, like talking about that layered approach, it's like we might start with a fortune telling approach to that question. And then we go, okay, how can we put your agency into this situation? What do you do with this information? Fortune telling is such an informative reading approach. Like you just, the information that you find out from being unafraid to say, what is going to happen? Tell me, cards. And then going, okay, now that we have this information, what can we do with it? And that's where it gets into the more like, oh, I don't divine the future sort of approach. And I think they can work really beautifully together. But I think, you know, talking about questions, I think fortune telling doesn't reject a question.
Yes.
Fortune telling says, if like, you know, this whole allergy that we have to yes or no questions, and I know we talked about this in our questions video, fortune telling says, okay, let's find out, yes or no, sort of thing. Yeah, I think fortune telling is so much more generous in its willingness to accept any question that comes to the table, and not feeling like it needs to reword the question, or how do we rephrase this so that you have more power, or, you know, whatever. What do you think is a fortune telling question?
It feels like fortune telling questions are questions that reflect a desire to have an active agency in something that feels like it's running away from you. So we've talked before about the like, what's going to happen in the football game question. Part of why you're asking is because like lots of factors that aren't you are going to determine the outcome of that football game, and that really matters to you. So here's an active agency that you can have. You know, I think part of what we do is, and our love of stories, your love of theater, my love of literature, us coming together and saying like, all of that has to do with all of this tarot stuff. It's suggesting like, we are going to divine the future for you because that's what you asked us to do. Like, I'm going to lay out cards and I can't tell you how they work or even if they work, but let's do this. Let's have fun together. And your act of asking a question is helping shape that fortune. You know, now I love the idea of like kind of what you're saying with it's giving you information. Now you have information to like really write your story because maybe you don't like the direction that that's going in. A question like, though, you know, is it going to rain tomorrow? Or what are the crops? What's going to happen with the crops? Like, that's just old-fashioned fortune telling, and I love it. Those are the questions that mattered most 100 years ago. We did a kind of in our blog, like an ethnic survey of our backgrounds. So like my Caribbean and Amish background, your Irish background. So like it is not surprising that the fortune telling questions that appeared in our backgrounds are like, can we eat next season? You know, like here are the urgencies of the moment. That is just straight fortune telling. Do I think that cards can really do that? I think I can lay cards and give you an answer. Is it true? I don't know. Like, but let's lay out the cards. You thought it was worth asking, and I'm here to say your question mattered. Let's see what the cards have to say. But I will say this, and I say this to everyone about every reading. Do not ever make a determinative life decision on the basis of a tarot reading or a card reading. That's wild. Don't do that. Don't leave your husband. Don't.
This is gathering information. Like this is just another source of information. No, I think I read something recently in a book that I am not going to remember exactly what the quote was, but she was actually talking about the sacrament and like how she has come to understand it as an adult as like bringing attention to something, like changing something just with attention alone. And I think that's what fortune telling does. It's like, this is something that I want to put attention on. I'm worried my daughter isn't going to graduate high school and it feels so out of control. And so like, let's put our attention on it and let's see how we can affect outcome, or let's put some worries at ease about the outcome, or let's, you know, if the answer is no, your daughter's not going to graduate on time, then it's like, let's look at the why. Why are we getting that answer? And let's see what we can do to affect change there. But I think ultimately what it is we are bringing attention to the things that matter the most to us, the things that keep us up at night, the things that are really important, the things that we're excited about and we want to happen and we want to go well. It's bringing our focus and our attention on those things in a really intentional way. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about that?
Let's list 3 different fortune telling questions that come to mind. So how about like just to give specific examples, because we've done a lot of theorizing, but like what?
Am I gonna get a promotion at work?
Am I gonna pass the test? I have some high school people in my life. Am I gonna pass the test? Will mom get mad if? And I'm not gonna put them on blast for the other part of that sentence.
Will mom get mad if? You know, am I gonna get you know, I just interviewed for a job. Am I gonna get a job offer? It's usually yes or no questions I find are like fortune telling questions. But let's think of one that's not a yes or no.
How will my husband make a different career decision if my business succeeds?
Ooh.
It's just a straight up, what you're really asking us to do is tell you the future. You're asking us for a dispositive answer. So not a like, here is like his like spiritual predisposition. At least as you asked the question, it seems like what you really want is like a straight answer, but life is never that clean, is it? So that's where it's like no conversation. If I gave you the answer you're asking for, it'd take me 2 minutes to lay out the cards and answer your question in one sentence. That's probably not what you wanted. You didn't have a conversation.
a touchy one, which is reading about health, is like if you have an ill person in your life, wanting to know the outcome of that, and again, it's touchy for a reason. We're not doctors. Like we don't claim to know what the outcome of an illness is going to be.
Yes.
But I think what that question really is where do I have control? In something that's really uncontrollable, where do I have some sense of control? What can I do?
Yes. And yes, that brings up those sensitive areas that, like, I think reflect the anxiety we were talking about grifting and about predatory practices. Like, here is the outcome of your lawsuit. I did have someone ask me once, like, what would be the outcome of her lawsuit years ago. And I was like, I really wish you didn't ask me this. And I think at the time I did a 9-card spread and like did a dance to make her change her question, kind of. But a more mature response where I am now, I think I would have like laid out the cards and said, let's see what they say. Like, and never make a decision on the basis of cards. I think that's just a bad idea as a life practice.
Again, there are some of these questions that come through that always need a disclaimer. It's like, I can lay out cards and I can answer your question. However, I don't claim to be a legal expert. I don't claim, we are just looking at the cards and what they say here.
It's not skirting anything either. I don't think you should make a single significant life decision on any one data point. Like, I got a nasty email from the lawyer. Like, do not make a decision on your entire lawsuit on the basis of that one communication, right? Like, use this as a data point if you want. But that is a bad, I think, practice in life to use a single piece of information. Excavate all the data, all the metaphors of the moment, right? Like, the computer metaphors are creepy. I use them. Scraping the internet for things. All right, what's our next question?
Okay, so now we're going to get specific about our practices. And the next question is, how much of our practice leans towards fortune telling as opposed to other styles of divination? Now, you wrote this question, so I'm going to ask a follow-up, which is are you talking about when we like client readings or reading for ourselves?
Reading for ourselves. That's what
I cannot do fortune telling for myself. I am too biased.
What an interesting thing. I use fortune telling decks for myself. Mm-hmm. I tend not to use them for dispositive fortune telling questions. Like, those aren't the questions I have, in part because I know my mind, and I think a clear answer will influence my sense of agency. This is not true for everyone. A lot of people ask fortune telling questions because an answer of any kind gives them a sense of agency and a feeling of like preparedness, right? So if the answer is it's not going to happen, then you feel shored up to like get stuff in place in case it doesn't happen and the cards are right. I think that I'm too fatalistic sometimes around the high stakes things that I would read my fortune about. So I love using fortune telling decks. I will straight up tell the fortune of people in shows. Like Pam and
doing that too, like for fun. When I'll say this, so I will use fortune telling decks, and I know we're going to talk about decks here in a minute, but I will use them in an investigative way. So it's like, if I'm in a conflict with somebody, I'll kind of dig around and be like, what's going on with this other person? Or if I'm trying to make a decision, like I've got a big decision to make right now, I will lay out some cards just to be like, okay, tell me some information about my choices here. But I cannot just say, here's my question, here's an answer when it comes to certain types of fortune telling questions for myself. I'm too invested in the outcome. And I think this is an interesting thing. I think fortune telling requires some sense of objectivity around the question.
I think that you're right. Some dispassion, because there is too much of an inclination to like read what you want. I think you're absolutely right. Like this is an area where you are very much served by seeking a reader who you trust, and just saying a reader who's willing to not like flinch away from the word fortune teller, and just say, I have this very clear question and I would like a very clear answer. A couple years ago refused to read. I wanted to do a fortune telling reading for the outcome of the election. And I was like, if I do this reading, we talked about this in our questions video. You never ask a question you don't want the answer to. I actually find that's a lot of the reason that I don't ask fortune telling questions, because a lot of things I just don't want the answer to. Reading for that question would not have, like, what would I have done? Like, what agency would I have had? I had a few more months of blissful ignorance and hope. But yeah, those are the kinds of things, though, I will like sometimes read about, like, you know, external things that are high stakes, and then like Pam and Jim on The Office.
Yeah.
Just to keep myself fresh. And I love studying a fortune telling deck. I love historical fortune telling decks. All right, so let's talk decks. Some show and tell. What are our favorite systems of fortune telling cartomancy? So the systems that folks would be familiar with and are traditional, and our favorite decks within those systems. And then the ones that are kind of not systems but are bespoke. You got something in hand. What do you have in hand?
Cards. First and foremost, playing cards. And I think playing cards can do a little bit of everything. I think they can do fortune telling. I think they can also do some really deep, kind of spiritual, like reflective work. I use playing cards in a reflective way, but I mean, I always have a deck of these on hand. Yeah. This is the provision playing cards. You can get these on Amazon, but they're really cool. They've got a lot of snake imagery on them. And we love a snake here at Sibyl's Lab. Love playing cards.
I love playing cards that have a personality in the courts. So this is the Miscellaneous Goods Company playing cards. I think I got these for $10 somewhere, but just the personality, like I love the layout of these pips, and I love the personality on the of the court cards. But yes, I love the democracy of playing cards, the grassroots nature of playing cards.
Well, and like I would argue that fortune telling systems generally are like it's accessible, you know, whether it be the innards of the animal that you just slaughtered for meat for the winter, or or playing card or dice or stones or bones. You know, these are all really accessible things, like historically for people. I mean, arguably playing cards are probably the least accessible form of fortune telling divination.
Say that.
Not every, I mean, you know, just the cost of printing, like historically, not, you know, throwing the bones, everybody has bones left over from the food that they make. You know, I would argue that fortune telling historically is a use what you have situation. And yeah. Adjacent to playing cards are actually used for poker games, but these are dice they're 8-sided dice that have playing cards on each side. There's like 5 of them, and I will use these sometimes, and those are fun.
I didn't know that. We have to, off camera at some point, you have to read for me with those. I'd love to see how you work with those.
They're fun.
All right, a very familiar system, probably the most familiar fortune-telling system is Lenormand. I have to say, I speak French. I learned to say it as Lenormand, but I sort of resent that I will not pronounce it in the correct way. You pronounce it in the correct way. But here, as an example, I have the Rana George Lenormand. Her book on the Essential Lenormand is terrific. And the little guidebook that comes with her actual deck is extremely instructive. She is a teacher writer, and the symbols are very clear. That's the most important thing in a Lenormand deck. So this is just a straight up 36 card Lenormand. There are some mashups that I will mention, but do you have any Lenormand decks that you especially love?
Yes, I pulled out my Madame Morrow Lenormand deck, or Lenormand. I don't say it correctly all the time, and frankly, Lenormand is probably still very, like, Americanized. But this is a reproduction of a historic deck by Tarot by 7. Again, very clear. You know exactly what you're looking at. I like how prominent the playing card associations are on this. Yes, I love Lenormand. Another thing about, you know, fortune telling systems and kind of different types of divination is that the symbolism, or even if it's not a system that uses symbolism, you know, it's so accessible. Like, a clover is a clover is a clover, and there's not some esoteric meaning. This is an exoteric system. It is all on the surface, and you know what you're dealing with here.
Yes.
And I appreciate that about, like, some of the traditions of fortune telling.
There are a lot of folks, so Robert M. Place has done this, and a lot of other folks who make full 52 card decks. If you don't know Lenormand, it has corresponding French playing card pips that are assigned to each of the symbols, but it only uses 36 of the 52 cards. So a lot of folks make a full playing card deck and fill in other fortune telling symbols on those missing cards. We're going to put the name of this deck in the description box, but this is an example of a deck that does this, and I absolutely love it. It's still in print. I forget the name offhand. We will include it, but it includes all of the Lenormand symbols and then adds them, right? Like on cards that otherwise wouldn't be included. It's beautiful. It's weird. But I love a playing card sized deck that has Lenormand plus.
Yeah. Shifting traditions a little bit, we go to Sibilla, which is also playing card associated, like has playing card associations like Lenormand. And this is, I mean, yeah, a room, a child, conversation. What?
It's a 52 card deck, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This one is longing. Yeah. Doctor. I like how people heavy Sibylla is. If you've got some issues that involve a lot of players, this is a good one to use. This is fun if you are a lover of murder mystery shows. This is a fun one to have out while you're watching so you can predict.
That's really funny. The doctor did it. So I would say quickly about Sibylla and Kipper. Tell me if you would agree with this read on them. They are both very relational. I find them much more so than Lenormand. So they have many more people cards and are much more engaged in those interpersonal politics. So they are good for those kinds of readings, as opposed to sort of, you know, snappy 36 card symbol focused. I mostly use Lenormand. What are you, a Lenormand or a Lenormand adjacent deck? What do you mostly use out of that set?
Lenormand. Yeah. I use Lenormand That is always where I begin when I am reading for conflict.
Really? Mm-hmm. And do you use your answer there to maybe reach for another cartomancy system?
Mm-hmm. And we kind of like go from there.
I love
So tarot, but majors only tarot, is a great fortune telling system to work with. This is the I don't know, this one by Artisan Tarot, the
Solesio.
The Solesio. This is a great deck. But even just pulling out the majors from any tarot deck that you have is a really fabulous fortune telling tool.
I love that tradition, that old school French grab the majors tradition. That is such a traditional French approach to tarot. Majors only, lay them out, very open reading. Like, so how are they looking at and talking to each other in these archetypes? So there are other tarot mashups that lean onto Lenormand type or fortune telling images. I know that you're going to show one of our favorites, and one of my favorites along with that fits with that is the Hyde Tarot. So it has the Tarot Association written on it, but also has a fortune telling symbol title. You can read it in whatever way you want. I find when there's a tarot deck that gives those options, I am much more likely to read it like a fortune telling deck than I am to go with the traditional tarot reading meaning.
And this is the Sorcery Underground. I'm sure you're tired of seeing it from us, but it really and truly is our favorite. One of our shared favorite decks. It is like a top 3 for me. If I had to only have 3 decks, this would definitely be one of them. Arguably, I'd probably keep just this one if I only had to keep one. It's so versatile. You can do so much with it. And it is very Lenormand. In fact, he uses the Lenormand symbol so that you can just pull out the Lenormand cards and read a Lenormand reading. But I mean, you know, a broken mirror for the 5 of hearts. Well, that's an upside down card, but you know, the 10 of swords is a sarcophagus. We've got a stork for the 6 of hearts. So yes, very fortune tellery, Lenormand. Even the majors, which are traditional tarot majors, he has put the letters of the alphabet on each one so that you can use it as a spirit board, right?
Yeah.
With a pendulum.
Yep.
So there's so much rich, like,
there is
fortune telling tradition baked into this deck and the way he's done it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I have to give a shout out. I didn't grab it for my collection, but a deck that is in print, the Sorcery Underground, is, last I checked, unfortunately out of print, but a deck that is extremely similar, same size, and same basic principles, is Kelly Fitzgerald's Nellie's deck, Truth and Story, and that comes with a really nicely sized guidebook that has woven in a fiction story that sort of contextualizes the background of the deck, but it is Lenormand plus in the minors and traditional tarot majors. It's really lovely. It's single color palette, black on parchment colored, but it's a great option that's still in print. So what are some other decks? There's the Oracle Belline as a fortune telling tradition. I would say that the Belline is often used for spiritual work as we imagine it. So more of that sort of depth tarot work as well as fortune telling. So there is not this sort of exclusive leaning on it for fortune telling work. I'm showing the Belline Reimagined. So this creator, Sibyl Tarot, actually, I think she is a French creator, created this version of the Belline. There are very few versions of the Belline that are not the traditional Belline Oracle, but I love this deck. I think I found it originally because I was like, I love French history and culture and cartomancy, so I had to order it separately on what was it, eBay, and then I had to get a guidebook in French and stumble my way through that. But now there are some actual English language books that are really great.
Also kind of adjacent, but something that can be used for spiritual work will also be used for fortune telling work is the Cartomancer playing card deck. I think is
that's your light deck, and here's the shadow
poker deck. Yeah, I think this uses actually kind of Jungian psychology. However, it also is a great fortune telling deck. So it can do a little bit of both.
And I think he's French Canadian, so we have English and French on the card. There's something about the French people who figured out to do a good fortune telling deck. I do not think there is the same allergy to the word or category of fortune teller there that there is here in part. Any other decks? I grabbed a few other ones. Here is another French deck, L'Oracle Bleu. I love this deck. It is very French. You can get it on Amazon France, but it is old school fortune telling, blue, all blue palette. Very committed to its weird imagery. And I would say playing card oracles is a very well-known one, and you can get this deck or versions of it mass market. I have one of the indie copies, but she has a very nice big book that goes along with it and can teach you how to read playing cards, plain playing cards, her style. But it also explains the symbols on her Anna Cortez's deck, the art of which was created by C.J. Freeman, her father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do,
and that's another deck that again does a little bit of heavy lifting. It is both introspective and it is also a fortune telling deck. It can do it all. The Mildred Payne's Secret Pocket Oracle, absolutely a fortune telling deck that Patrick Valenza created his own system for. But again, we're kind of back to these like really simple symbols that are so intuitive. What's a door? A door is an opening to something else. What is a scourge? I mean, it's a whip. Like, we're talking about Payne here. What is a tree? You know, tree is growth, tree is stability, tree is roots. A mirror, we're talking about reflections here. A stump, a tree cut down. Like it's, you know, he's done a really lovely job with this one.
It's cheeky. It's very cheeky. Creator of the Deviant Moon, for folks who don't know. But it is. It's very cheeky and like Halloween-y. You may have already said that. I was looking for decks around my table. Pam Wishbow is another creator, fortune telling deck creator that is really great at a range of fortune telling images. I'm not sure if these specific decks are in or out of print right now, but she puts out different fortune telling decks. So this is the Collected Memories deck. Like pretty simple scale. What do we have? Kitchen knife. What would kitchen knife mean to you, Amelia?
Oh, I mean, well, it's a tool, but it also, I mean, it cuts. Like we are talking about separating one thing from another, ultimately, and paring away the parts that we aren't going to use.
Crow. We have pressed leaf. So it's weird. I love it. I find all of her decks a little weird. And I also have the Urban Divination deck, another of her similar decks, but very urban symbols. So the wagging, what does she call it? The wagging reminder, the cornerstone sandwich. This really brings me back to Chicago. The bones on the street. This one's a little, she's pushing the envelope, the condom wrapper. Yeah, the pigeon. We all know those flying rats in the city. Pigeons get a bad name. All right. Any other decks that we want to mention?
No, I mean, I think there's dice, there's charm casting, the options are endless. Geomancy is a little bit fortune telling.
I think it's fortune telling.
There's a lot of fortune telling. I use geomancy in a very specific way that is more introspective, but yeah. There's things that aren't deck specific.
One of my favorite decks I do want to mention, the creator of the Incidental Tarot had for a while, and I don't know if this is back in print or not, the Curious Oracle. I absolutely love this deck. It's the symbols, and they're little and pretty, and she has a kind of quick key of what she intends the symbol to mean. So the torch, intention, Mercury rising, medicine, just fantastic. I love this deck. It speaks loudly. It has good color language as well. All right.
Final question is, what advice do we have for someone who is interested in expanding their practice to this type of work? Any specific book recommendations, deck recommendations, or just generally like spreads to start with? I would actually recommend starting with what you know. Start with a tarot deck and use that in a way that is, if tarot is your thing, use a tarot deck in a way that leans towards fortune telling. Just start by considering the questions, considering the kind of implication behind fortune telling with what you already have. A box spread is a fabulous place to start with fortune telling because there's a lot of information there. By a box spread, we mean 9 cards, so 3 rows of 3. And just start there. If you want to make it feel a little different, pull your majors out and work with a majors only spread for a while, and then move on to another deck. But yeah, I would start with what you know and just start by approaching what you know with a different lens.
I think that's great advice. I learned Lenormand with Rana George's The Essential Lenormand. That book, it's in print, but I think she's releasing an expanded edition in a couple months or something. The unexpanded edition taught me well enough. So that was a great book. Serge Pirotte, I think that's how you say his name, is a French author who just came out with an English language book about how to read the Oracle Belline. Forget the title, but it should be easy enough to find. I am a big fan of the Belline if you're interested in the French tradition, and his book is not long, but it's extremely informative and succinct. So I think that's a great way to go about that.
I think, yeah, and if you're ready to like expand beyond tarot, I recommend starting with playing cards even. Playing cards or Lenormand, whatever feels more accessible to you. Like, what looks more exciting? Is it learning the symbols of the Lenormand, or is it figuring out playing cards? There are a lot of great, Danielle just mentioned some great Lenormand resources for playing cards. I mean, I love Anna Cortez's playing card oracles. We love Roger J. Horn's playing card book. That's another really great one. Corey Hutchison has 52 Devils. That's a great, really thin and very accessible playing card book. And then there's the free, I think you can find it through the Wayback Machine, but you should just be able to Google like Hedge Witch playing cards. That is a great playing card system to start with. That's super accessible. And they even have it in like layers. So it's like, here's the beginner layer, and you get really familiar with that. Here's intermediate, and here's advanced. But yeah, whatever is exciting to you, start there. Like,
don't hold back from like, we've really, working with Lenormand, sat in a hotel room, laid pictures on a bed, and said, like, what does a bird mean? Like the whole idea of our grandmothers reading with Lenormand, they did not have books. They had each other and images, right? Like our collective world grandmothers who were reading with these cards, and grandfathers. So like there is no reason to mystify something that is a grassroots tradition and to lean into like there's something so beautiful about leaning into that history. Playing cards are pretty hundreds of years old, so it's kind of cool to think of like joining a long tradition like that. We're going to practice. We're going to model some reading by answering a question that we have for the collective. We do love to wrap up with a question. So a question for the collective: how can integrating, if we don't already have a fortune telling practice, or expanding a fortune telling practice, enhance your week? So if you dip your toes somehow or lean more into fortune telling this week, how can it bring something to your week? I'm going to read with the Curious Oracle. And, you know, reading fortune telling decks is different than reading tarot. So I typically, if I want a short and quick reading, will read 3 cards as a sentence. How do you feel if we each read our own 3-card spread and then come together?
Okay. I am going to be reading with Mildred Payne.
That snarky woman in her asylum. Patrick Valenza has such a great mythology around Mildred Payne if you go on his website. And there are a few different sizes of that deck. He is one of the great creators, I think, of our current time.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, okay. So I got rope, stick, and bone. And I do not have his keywords handy, so I'm just going based off, I'm going old school, and we're going off of what do these things mean? So a rope is something that binds, it's something that ties, and a stick is something I like imagine a stick being the thing that we like prod with. It's the thing that we poke at, right? And the bones are like the structure of something, right? So I think what we're saying here is that fortune telling will kind of help you unattach yourself from a situation and really kind of get to the structure, like get to the heart of it, get to like what's really there. You know, I think sometimes with our kind of modern version of tarot reading, it can be really easy to tell ourselves stories and kind of work around an issue. And fortune telling doesn't allow room for that. Fortune telling asks us to really examine, like, okay, I think the reason that I might be avoiding the truth in the heart of this matter is because I have an attachment to it. Like I'm invested in the outcome. And this is why I can't do fortune telling readings for myself, really. And so I think fortune telling kind of encourages us to release those attachments and really kind of prod at the juice and the stuff that we might be avoiding because of our investment in that outcome.
I think you really modeled to how much you can get out of a 3-card reading. Like a 3-card fortune telling reading can give you a lot of information. I really like that. All right, so I got Echo, Child Spirit, and Crescent Moon. And she does give us little hints of what these words or these symbols mean. So for Echo, we have reflection. For Child Spirit, we have potential. And for Crescent Moon, we have intuition. I'm reading these cards to say, so I really like with Echo, you know, and Child Spirit, there are fortune telling questions buried in you that you have not been indulging. If you've sat through the fullness of this delightful video that we're making, like chances are you like tarot and have some kind of invested or growing tarot practice, and you probably know how to ask depth questions in tarot. But like there are simple questions inside of you, like what's going to happen with my neighbor, or what's going, like they just put a for sale sign outside my neighbor's house. I actually should do a fortune telling reading on that. But like, what's going to happen with the sale of that house? That's not what is the spiritual evolution of my neighbor? That's just what's going to happen to that house. Those inner simple questions that we don't normally indulge, depending on your own practice. This is, I think, saying, listen to those voices. Like that child has some childish questions that you might be dismissing. Intuit what those are and validate them and answer them. So, like your fortune telling practice this week can do your inner child the service of saying to that simple questioned person inside of you, that question matters. So, like your question that you have that's a little one, quote unquote, isn't little. It really does matter. Let's pull some cards on it. So that's my spiel. That's what these 3 amazing cards from the Curious Oracle are telling me.
All right, folks. I do want to take an opportunity here to say that our Sibyl's Lab blog, Danielle, has put out a really great series about looking at some different fortune telling traditions from around the world. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Yeah, and if you are excited about fortune telling and you're like motivated to want to dive in more, we absolutely offer mentoring, especially around this topic. And either one of us would be happy to work with you on that. We also use a lot of fortune telling in our readings themselves. And so if you're curious to see it in action, reach out for a reading. We'd love to do that for you. But in the meantime, you can stay tuned for our weekly videos. We release at least one a week every Wednesday. And you can check out the description box below for all of the decks that we talked about, our social media handles, where to book a reading or a mentoring session, as well as the link to our blog. And until next time, guys, we will see you in the lab.
See you in the lab. Bye, guys.